The morning light filtered softly through Mia's bedroom blinds, painting gentle stripes across the wooden floor and her scattered textbooks. Outside, the world stirred in quiet rhythm. Birds fluttered between the oaks, a neighbor's sprinkler hissed over the lawn, and the low hum of a distant car mingled with the breeze. The day felt ordinary, yet full of subtle promise. Mia sat cross-legged on the floor, tying her sneakers slowly. She was distracted, her mind drifting between the homework waiting on her desk and the lingering tiredness from yesterday's school project. Her fingers hesitated over the laces, when a faint, almost hesitant whimper drew her attention. It was soft, careful, almost apologetic. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned toward the corner of the room, half hidden behind the curtain. There, huddled in a patch of sunlight, was a tiny puppy. His fur was dusty and slightly tangled, but his eyes, dark, glimmering, and curious, held something remarkable. Something older, almost knowing. The puppy's ears twitched as he noticed her movement. He took a tentative step forward, then another, and finally nudged her hand with his wet nose. It wasn't demanding or desperate. It was gentle, curious, testing the waters. Mia froze for a heartbeat, her chest tight with a mixture of surprise and warmth. Slowly, she extended her hand, careful not to frighten him. "Hey there," she whispered softly. You're okay?" The puppy pressed his tiny head into her palm. His tail wagged slowly, deliberately, a rhythm that seemed to echo her own heartbeat. Mia smiled, a quiet warmth blossoming in her chest. She hadn't realized she'd been waiting for this, a silent, wordless connection, but now that it had come, it filled her completely. He explored the room with careful curiosity, sniffing the edge of her desk, pausing at a notebook, and tilting his head at a pencil on the floor. When he looked back at her, his gaze was purposeful, focused. There was an intelligence in the way he observed her, a sense that he was noticing things she didn't yet understand. Her parents called from downstairs, voices soft but faint. Mia barely heard them. She knelt fully now, arms open, and the puppy climbed into her lap, settling comfortably as if he had been there all along. His warmth pressed against her, and she could feel a soft, steady heartbeat beneath her hands. The sunlight bathed them both in a golden glow. The ordinary morning seemed to stretch and slow, holding its breath. Mia gently stroked the puppy's fur, savoring the quiet intimacy of the moment. She whispered again, "You're home now." A faint sound outside, a distant bird, the rustle of leaves, made her glance toward the window. For a fleeting second, she imagined the puppy sensing something far beyond her room. He looked up at her, ears perked, eyes wide. There was a message in that gaze she couldn't yet interpret, and yet she understood it completely in her heart. Mia adjusted him in her lap, letting him rest. The puppy twitched his nose, sniffing the air, then turned to examine a small photo frame on her desk. He pawed it lightly and nudged it toward her. Mia reached for it, noticing a faint dirt smudge where he had touched it. A quiet smile spread across her face. "It's okay," she whispered. "We'll figure it out together." Time seemed suspended in those few minutes, the golden sunlight, the soft rustle of leaves, the warmth of fur pressed against her. The world outside her room continued, but inside, something extraordinary had begun. Something gentle, subtle, a bond forming without words, without need for explanation. Her chest tightened with a soft, unfamiliar excitement. The puppy yawned, tiny and delicate, then curled into her lap. She rested her chin on his head, listening to the quiet rhythm of his breath. In that serene moment, she realized something she couldn't yet name. Her life had shifted, subtly, irrevocably. Mia's eyes drifted to the window. The morning light caught dust motes in the air, sparkling like tiny stars. She breathed slowly, savoring the warmth, the quiet, the presence of the tiny creature she hadn't expected but now couldn't imagine living without. And as the puppy looked up at her once more, tail swishing slowly, she understood one truth: what the puppy sensed would change everything. The ordinary morning had become extraordinary. And Mia, she was ready to discover just how deep that quiet, wordless connection could go. The afternoon sun had shifted, pouring a soft amber glow across Mia's bedroom. The tiny puppy stretched in her lap, then padded carefully to the windowsill, sniffing the air with quiet concentration. It was strange, almost as if he were noticing things that Mia couldn't see, sensing whispers of life in the corners of the room. Mia watched him with fascination. "What is it, little guy?" she whispered. Her voice was calm, soft, almost a part of the sunlight itself. The puppy paused, tilting his head at a faint creak outside the hallway. His ears twitched, and then he padded over to the stack of books on her desk, nudging one slightly forward with his tiny nose. It seemed so deliberate. Mia picked up the book he had nudged and frowned thoughtfully. Nothing appeared unusual at first, just a notebook from last week's homework. But the puppy pawed at it again, nudging her hand as if urging her to open it. Hesitant, she flipped it open. Inside, a small sketch she had drawn of her dog from the park weeks ago lay half-finished. She had almost forgotten it. The puppy's gaze seemed to say, "Look closer, there's more here." Curious now, Mia traced her finger over the lines, feeling a strange warmth. The puppy sniffed her hand, then licked it softly. She laughed quietly, a breathless, delighted sound. "You're clever, aren't you?" she murmured. He wagged his tail slowly, deliberate, as if acknowledging the compliment without need for words. Over the next hour, she watched him explore the room. Every object he touched, every corner he sniffed, seemed to hold meaning. A pencil tipped slightly on the floor, a small scarf draped over the chair, even the worn patch of carpet by the door, he noticed them all. Not recklessly, not playfully, but with gentle intention, as if guiding Mia toward awareness of things she had overlooked. When she bent down to pick up a stray sock, he nudged her hand again, pawing lightly. She glanced up at him, and in his deep, shining eyes, she thought she saw understanding, almost human in its quiet insight. It wasn't just curiosity, it was intuition. Mia's heart fluttered with wonder. You really notice everything, don't you?" she whispered. The puppy leaned into her hand, resting his tiny head against her fingers, a slow, purposeful wag of his tail punctuating the moment. The room seemed still around them, the light warmer, the air softer. Later, as she moved to the kitchen to grab a glass of water, he followed silently, patting at her heels. She caught him sniffing at the refrigerator door, tilting his head as if sensing something beyond the hum of the appliance. She chuckled softly. "All right, you got my attention." Mia began observing him more carefully throughout the day. When her phone rang unexpectedly, he tilted his head and stepped slightly forward, paw raised, as though alerting her to answer. When a gust of wind rattled the windows, he went to check the hallway, sniffing the floor and corners thoroughly, then returned to her side as if satisfied that all was well. By evening, a subtle pattern had emerged. He reacted to people, objects, and small changes in the environment with quiet purpose. Sometimes he would nudge a photo frame, sometimes a pen, sometimes a small piece of paper. Each time, Mia found herself discovering things she had overlooked, a receipt she needed, a forgotten note from school, even a small sketch she had abandoned. There was no urgency in his actions. No fear. Only gentle guidance, quiet understanding, and a warm, patient insistence that made her feel seen. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the room, Mia felt a soft bond deepen. She settled onto her bed with him curled beside her, watching the last streaks of sunlight fade. He rested his head on her arm, breathing softly, his eyes half closed but still alert. Mia stroked his fur, whispering, "I've never met anyone like you." And in the quiet of that evening, with the gentle shadows stretching across the walls, she realized the truth: this tiny creature had a purpose beyond companionship. His intuitive nature, his quiet understanding, and his deliberate attentiveness were more than just instinct. They were a bridge, a gentle, emotional thread connecting her to something deeper than herself. The puppy shifted slightly, raising his head as if sensing her thoughts, eyes glimmering in the fading light. Mia's chest tightened, a soft thrill of anticipation fluttering in her heart. She didn't yet know what the puppy's intuition might reveal, but she knew it would be important. And as the night deepened, with the world hushed outside and the soft glow of her lamp casting warmth across the room, Mia whispered again, I think you might be more than just a puppy." He tilted his head, tail swishing slowly, as if he understood her completely. The next morning dawned cool and quiet, with sunlight slipping softly through the curtains. Mia sat on the edge of her bed, the tiny puppy nestled at her feet, his soft breaths creating a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat in the still room. She studied him closely, noticing details she hadn't before: the way his ears twitched at the slightest sound, the subtle lift of his nose when a breeze drifted in through the window, the careful way he placed his paws when moving around her room. Something about him felt deliberate, purposeful, intelligent in a way that was unusual for such a small creature. She tilted her head, curiosity blooming. "What are you thinking, little guy?" she whispered. He looked up at her, eyes glimmering as though he understood her question, then padded toward her desk, nudging a folded piece of paper with his nose. Mia bent down to pick it up. It was a note she had forgotten, a reminder from school, something minor, but the way the puppy had found it felt almost as if he knew she would need it. Over the next hour, she observed him carefully, noticing patterns in his behavior. He reacted to small changes in the room: an open drawer, a chair slightly out of place, even a faint smell on a piece of fabric. Mia began keeping a mental note of his actions, tracking what seemed ordinary versus what seemed intentional. Her curiosity grew. She began to talk to him more, softly, in short, quiet sentences. "Do you want to see what's outside?" she asked. He wagged his tail slowly and followed her to the window, pressing his paws against the sill, nose sniffing the air. When she opened it to let in a breeze, he cocked his head toward the distant sound of the street, then returned to sit beside her, as if signaling that everything was as it should be. By midday, Mia found herself confiding in him. "I don't know why, but it feels like you understand more than I can see." The puppy pressed close, resting his head on her knee, his presence calming, almost reassuring. It wasn't just companionship, it was guidance, quiet and gentle. She began noticing subtler things too. When the mail arrived, he would run to the door, sniffing the letters and parcels, then pawing at one in particular. It was always something relevant: a note from her teacher, a card from a friend. The puppy's intuitive gestures were small but meaningful, almost as if he were directing her attention to things she would otherwise miss. Mia's parents peeked in from the hallway, curious about the bond she was forming. "He's special, isn't he?" her mom said softly, watching the puppy nudge a small notebook toward Mia. She nodded slowly. "I think he understands more than we realize." By late afternoon, Mia was fully captivated. She followed him around the house, observing his every move, noting the subtle ways he guided her attention. He paused at the bookshelf, then looked up at her, tilting his head toward a shelf where a forgotten photo album rested. She opened it, discovering pictures she had almost forgotten, memories of family trips, friends, and small moments of happiness. The puppy had led her to them without words, and she felt a warm, swelling sense of gratitude and wonder. As evening approached, the golden sunlight painted the walls of her room, and Mia sank onto the bed, puppy curled against her side. She traced gentle lines along his fur, marveling at the depth of their connection. "I've never met anyone like you," she murmured. The puppy yawned, tiny and delicate, but kept his eyes half open, alert, as if acknowledging her words with quiet understanding. She began to wonder about his past, about how he had ended up abandoned, and what life had been like before he found her. Yet even in her curiosity, there was no fear, only gentle fascination. He had a presence that invited calm observation rather than worry, trust rather than anxiety. That night, as the house grew quiet and shadows stretched across the walls, Mia lay awake, thinking. She watched the puppy curl up at the foot of her bed, his small chest rising and falling steadily. She realized that curiosity had transformed into something deeper, an awareness that this tiny creature was more than just a pet. He was intuitive, perceptive, and quietly guiding her attention in ways that felt almost magical. Mia reached out, brushing a strand of hair from his eyes. "I think you're going to teach me things I never knew I needed to see," she whispered. The puppy shifted slightly, tail wagging slowly, as if confirming her thought. And in that moment, Mia understood a truth she could barely articulate: the puppy's presence wasn't just comforting, it was awakening something inside her. A quiet curiosity, a sense of wonder, and an emotional connection that was deeper than she had imagined. Outside, the world carried on. Traffic hummed faintly, a dog barked in the distance, and the leaves rustled softly, but inside Mia's room, something extraordinary had taken root. The puppy looked up at her one last time before sleep claimed him, eyes shimmering in the soft lamplight. Mia felt her heart tighten with anticipation. She didn't yet know what his gentle intuition would reveal next, but she knew it would matter. And as she closed her eyes, a quiet thought lingered in her mind: there's more to you than anyone could see, including me. The next morning, sunlight spilled through Mia's window, casting soft, golden streaks across her room. The puppy stirred on the rug, stretching and yawning, his small body catching the warm light. Mia smiled as she watched him, feeling a strange mix of comfort and wonder. Somehow, in just a few days, he had become more than a companion, he had become a presence she couldn't imagine being without. She sat cross-legged on the floor, and he trotted over, tail wagging slowly, deliberate, almost ceremonious. He nudged her hand with his nose and looked up, eyes glimmering with quiet intelligence. "Morning, little guy," she whispered. "Ready for another day?" He responded with a gentle bark and a slow, deliberate paw on her knee. Mia laughed softly, the sound warm and melodic. It wasn't just laughter at his antics, it was laughter born of connection, of a bond growing stronger with each shared glance and touch. Throughout the morning, their rhythm unfolded naturally. The puppy would explore corners of the room, sniffing carefully at books and small objects, then return to Mia, as if ensuring she was following. Sometimes, he nudged her gently towards something she hadn't noticed, a photo, a note, or even a forgotten toy from her childhood. Each action, small but purposeful, strengthened their connection. During breakfast, he stayed close, ears perked, observing every motion. When a piece of toast fell from her plate, he sniffed it politely, then gently nudged it toward her hand instead of gobbling it up. Mia smiled, feeling a warmth she couldn't explain. This wasn't just a puppy, this was someone who understood, in the quietest of ways, what mattered. Later, she took him outside. The morning air was crisp, the light soft against the grass. He trotted beside her, nose to the ground, ears alert. Every so often, he would pause, tilt his head, or paw gently at a patch of earth, urging Mia to notice small details she would have otherwise ignored. She began to realize that he wasn't just playful, he was teaching her presence, awareness, and a sense of calm attentiveness. They spent hours wandering the yard, sharing long moments of quiet companionship. She talked to him about her schoolwork, friends, and dreams, and although he didn't speak, his gentle, attentive presence made her feel heard in a way she hadn't felt before. He nudged her when she seemed distracted, rested his head on her lap when she seemed tired, and wagged his tail when she smiled. By afternoon, their connection had deepened to something almost unspoken. Mia noticed that even her mood shifted when he was near. Stress seemed lighter, worries softer. She watched him curl up beside her on the sofa, resting his head on her lap, eyes half closed but still alert. Every soft breath, every gentle movement, reinforced the bond they were building. That evening, she lay on the floor while he lay beside her, tiny paw resting on her arm. The sunlight dimmed, casting the room in warm amber hues. Mia traced gentle lines along his fur, feeling the softness, warmth, and steady rhythm of life. "You're more than just a puppy," she whispered. "You're something else." He responded with a soft nuzzle, pressing closer. Mia's heart tightened with quiet emotion. She realized that this bond wasn't just comforting, it was transformative. She found herself observing the world differently, noticing small joys, subtle patterns, and quiet beauty in everyday life, guided by the gentle instincts of a tiny creature who seemed older than his size suggested. Later, as night fell and the house quieted, Mia prepared for bed. The puppy followed, padding quietly behind her. She watched him curl up at the foot of her bed, small chest rising and falling steadily. She felt a deep, almost indescribable gratitude for his presence, this quiet, loyal companion who had already changed her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. Mia lay down beside him, brushing her fingers across his fur. I think we're going to learn a lot from each other," she whispered. The puppy's eyes gleamed faintly in the soft lamplight, and his tail wagged ever so slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they now shared. As she drifted to sleep, a quiet thought lingered in her mind: the bond they were building was more than companionship. It was trust, understanding, and a shared rhythm of life that would guide them both in ways she couldn't yet predict. And in that moment, Mia felt a soft certainty that this connection, gentle, quiet, and profound, was the beginning of something extraordinary. The night wrapped the room in warmth and shadows, and the puppy, small and alert, seemed to sense it too. He rested close, protective in a way that was tender rather than possessive. Mia smiled in the darkness, knowing, without fully understanding how, that their hearts had already begun a journey together that would quietly, gently change them both forever. The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through Mia's curtains, painting her room in warm, golden hues. The puppy stirred, stretching each tiny limb, ears twitching at the faintest sounds of the waking house. Mia watched him carefully, fascinated by the gentle rhythm of his movements. It was remarkable how deliberate he was in everything he did. Every paw, every sniff, every small gesture seemed filled with intention. Today, though, he acted differently. There was a focused energy about him, subtle but undeniable. He trotted over to the corner of Mia's desk and nudged a small box with his nose. Curious, Mia leaned closer. The box was one she had nearly forgotten, a keepsake her grandmother had given her, filled with tiny notes, pressed flowers, and old photographs. She picked it up gently, surprised that the puppy had noticed it among the clutter. As she opened the box, he watched her intently, tail wagging slowly, eyes bright and alert. Inside were memories she hadn't thought about in years, birthday cards, old family photos, and a tiny note from her grandmother. Mia's breath caught. She hadn't looked at these in so long, yet the puppy had somehow led her here. You wanted me to see this, didn't you?" she whispered, running her fingers over the faded paper. He pressed his head against her hand, his warm gaze fixed on her as though confirming that yes, this was important. Throughout the morning, the puppy continued these subtle hints, nudging her toward objects, gently pawing at notes she had misplaced, even sniffing near her journal as if urging her to open it. Each action carried a quiet significance. Mia realized he wasn't just playful or curious, he was guiding her attention to things she had overlooked, helping her reconnect with memories, emotions, and moments she had forgotten. By afternoon, she had begun to understand the depth of his intuition. He seemed to sense not just objects, but feelings. When she felt restless or distracted, he would sit near her, leaning gently against her, nudging her toward calm. When she hesitated or worried, he would pause softly at her arm, guiding her back to presence, reminding her of simple, quiet joys. Mia's curiosity grew stronger. She began to talk to him, softly, as though sharing her thoughts aloud might help him guide her further. "Do you remember this?" she asked, showing him an old photograph of herself at the park. He sniffed it carefully, then nudged a small notebook beside it. Inside was a note she had written months ago, detailing a dream she had nearly forgotten, a dream she had long thought unimportant. A quiet warmth blossomed in her chest. She laughed softly, brushing his fur. "You're incredible," she whispered. He wagged his tail, a slow, deliberate motion, as if acknowledging her words. Later, as she sat on the floor, flipping through the small box of keepsakes, the puppy patted over and nudged a small envelope. Mia opened it carefully. Inside was a letter from her grandmother she had never fully read, a heartfelt note about kindness, patience, and noticing the small, quiet moments that make life meaningful. The words resonated deeply, filling her with a sense of peace she hadn't realized she had been missing. You brought me here for this," she whispered, tears prickling her eyes. He rested his head on her lap, tail swishing slowly, as though silently affirming that he had indeed guided her toward this moment. The gentle light of late afternoon streamed through the window, illuminating the room with warmth and calm. Mia felt a profound shift in herself, gratitude, wonder, and the quiet realization that this tiny creature was helping her see the world with new eyes. That evening, she prepared for bed, carrying the small box and letters with her. The puppy followed closely, nudging her hand as she walked, keeping her company with quiet, deliberate steps. When she placed the box beside her bed, he curled up at her feet, small chest rising and falling steadily, eyes half closed but still alert. Mia stroked his soft fur, whispering, "I don't think I've ever met anyone like you, ever." He shifted slightly, pressing closer, and she felt a gentle warmth spreading through her chest. As night settled in, and the room was bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, she realized the truth: this puppy wasn't just a companion. He was a guide, gently revealing pieces of life, memory, and emotion she had overlooked. The depth of his intuition was more than instinct, it was connection, understanding, and empathy condensed into a small, warm presence. She smiled, closing her eyes for a moment, listening to the quiet rhythm of his breathing. A thought lingered in her mind, there's more you're going to show me. I can feel it. And as she drifted to sleep, the puppy nestled at her side. She realized something extraordinary. He wasn't just changing her environment, he was quietly changing her heart. The following morning, a soft haze of sunlight filtered through Mia's bedroom window, dust motes dancing lazily in the warm glow. The puppy stirred at the edge of the bed, stretching each tiny limb and lifting his head to observe her. Mia smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. Their bond had grown stronger with each passing day, yet today felt different. There was a subtle energy in the air, a quiet tension that wasn't frightening, only significant. She got out of bed and padded to the window. Outside, the neighborhood hummed gently, a bird calling in the distance, the faint hum of a car engine, a neighbor watering her garden. The puppy followed closely, ears alert, nose twitching as if sensing more than Mia could see. When she turned toward the desk, he stopped, his gaze fixed on a small envelope tucked behind a stack of papers. Mia picked it up, curious. It was addressed in handwriting she didn't recognize. She hesitated, glancing at the puppy, whose gaze seemed to say, "This matters." "Open it." Inside was a letter, simple yet profound. It spoke of a lost dog that had once belonged to a family who had moved away, someone who had left pieces of their story behind, small reminders of love, trust, and loyalty. The words were gentle, but they carried weight, and as Mia read, a knot formed in her chest. The letter hinted that the puppy she now held had once belonged to another person, someone who had cared deeply for him, yet circumstances had separated them. The puppy nudged her hand gently, tail swishing slowly, as if guiding her through her emotions. Tears pricked Mia's eyes. "So, you've been through so much already?" she whispered softly. He rested his head on her knee, eyes half closed, radiating quiet understanding. For hours that morning, Mia held him close, reading the letter repeatedly. She realized the puppy wasn't just intuitive about objects or small details, he seemed to understand emotions, histories, and unspoken stories. He had sensed her curiosity, her longing, and even her need to uncover pieces of his past. Later, as she wandered the backyard with him, the soft sunlight warming the grass beneath their feet, she noticed how deliberate his actions were. He paused at familiar spots, sniffing the air, pawing lightly at small patches of earth, then looking back at her, waiting for her to notice. Each motion seemed to carry quiet significance, as if he were trying to guide her toward understanding, not just of him, but of herself. Mia sat on the grass, letting the puppy curl into her lap. "You've changed so much for me already," she whispered, brushing her fingers through his soft fur. "I can't imagine my days without you now." He rested his head against her chest, tail wagging slowly, a rhythm that mirrored the steady beat of her own heart. By afternoon, the emotional weight of the morning lingered. The letter had revealed more than she expected, stirring feelings she hadn't realized were inside her: empathy, gratitude, and awe at the resilience of this small creature who had survived abandonment yet still carried warmth and trust in his eyes. When her parents peeked into the backyard, they noticed the intensity of their bond. "He's remarkable," her mother said softly, watching the puppy nuzzle Mia's hand. Mia nodded, her voice quiet. "He's more than I could have imagined. He's teaching me things I never knew I needed to learn." That evening, as the golden sunset filled the room, Mia reflected on everything that had happened over the past few days. The puppy's gentle intuition, his deliberate guidance, and his unspoken understanding had not only revealed pieces of his own past but had shown her how to notice life more deeply. The small moments, the letter, the nudges, the careful guidance had transformed ordinary days into experiences rich with meaning. She knelt beside him, brushing a strand of fur behind his ear. "You're incredible," she whispered. "You've changed me, and I don't think I even realized it until now." He shifted slightly, pressing closer, tail swishing slowly, as if acknowledging her words with quiet pride. As night fell, and the room was bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, Mia realized the full significance of their connection. The puppy had helped her discover not just his story, but her own capacity for empathy, patience, and understanding. He had quietly guided her toward the emotional depth of life she hadn't noticed before, opening her heart with every soft nudge and gentle paw. She lay on the bed, the puppy curled beside her, breathing softly. A quiet thought lingered in her mind: "You've led me to understand things I didn't know I needed to understand, and I'm grateful." Outside, The world carried on in the faint hum of life, the distant chirping of birds, but inside Mia's room, something extraordinary had shifted. The gentle revelation of the puppy's past, combined with the undeniable bond they shared, had reached an emotional turning point. And she knew, deep in her heart, that the days ahead would hold even greater discoveries, guided by the quiet wisdom of a tiny, unwavering companion. The morning light was soft and golden, spilling through Mia's window and warming the edges of her room. The puppy stirred in his sleep, tiny paws stretching out, ears twitching as if he were listening to the gentle sounds of the day awakening. Mia watched him quietly, a soft smile on her lips, heart swelling with the realization that he had become something far greater than a companion. He had become a quiet guide, a source of comfort, and a living bridge to understanding life in a new way. She reached down to stroke his fur, and he responded with a gentle nuzzle, eyes opening briefly to meet hers. It was as though he understood the depth of her gratitude, and in his gaze was a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey. That morning, Mia decided to explore the box of letters and keepsakes again, sensing that there was still more to discover. The puppy padded alongside her, tail swishing slowly, alert and deliberate. When she opened a small envelope tucked between faded photographs, she found a note from her grandmother she hadn't fully read before. It spoke of kindness, intuition, and the small, often unnoticed acts that could change someone's life. Reading the letter, Mia felt tears prick her eyes. And then, as if on cue, the puppy nudged a photograph toward her with his nose, a picture of a young girl holding a puppy, both smiling, sun catching their hair. Mia recognized the girl immediately. It was her, years ago, at a family picnic, and the puppy, it was him. Her breath caught. The connection was unmistakable. This wasn't just any puppy, it was a part of her own life, long forgotten but now returned in the most extraordinary way. He had been with her before, even if only briefly, and somehow, by fate or instinct, he had found his way back to her. She knelt down, cradling him gently. You're mine," she whispered, voice trembling. "And I never realized it until now." The puppy leaned into her embrace, tail wagging in slow, deliberate sweeps. There was no question in his eyes, only trust, recognition, and the quiet joy of reunion. Throughout the day, Mia reflected on the journey that had brought them together. The puppy's subtle guidance, the nudges, the pause, the soft intuition had not only revealed parts of his past but it also helped her reconnect with her own memories, her own emotions, and her capacity for deep, unspoken understanding. When she walked through the house, he followed closely, occasionally pausing to nudge an object or look at her expectantly, as if reminding her that every detail mattered. Each gesture, small yet significant, reinforced the truth she had come to understand: this puppy's presence was transformative, not just for the moments they shared, but for the entire rhythm of her life. Later, sitting in the backyard as the sun dipped low, casting the world in warm, amber light, Mia realized something else. She wasn't the only one who had changed. The puppy, too, had found his place safe, loved, and understood. Every shy glance, every tentative nudge, every deliberate wag of his tail had led them both to this truth, that love, trust, and intuition could heal hearts and bridge years of absence without a single word spoken. Her parents watched from the porch, noticing the quiet miracle of their bond. "It's like he's always known her," her father said softly. Her mother nodded, eyes glistening. "And she's always known him, in a way only they could understand." By evening, the house was bathed in the golden glow of lamplight. Mia lay on her bed, the puppy curled beside her, resting his head on her arm. She traced gentle lines along his fur, feeling the soft warmth, the steady heartbeat, and the unspoken understanding between them. "We found each other again," she whispered. "And I think we're exactly where we're supposed to be." He shifted slightly, nudging her hand with his nose, tail wagging slowly. Mia smiled, a quiet sense of completion settling over her. The mystery of his past had been revealed, and it was more beautiful than she had imagined. Not because of any grand gesture or dramatic story, but because of the quiet, enduring bond that had always existed, waiting for them to recognize it again. As the night deepened, and shadows softened around the room, Mia held him close, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and the warmth of his small body against hers. She realized that this was more than a reunion, it was a homecoming, a heart-touching revelation that had transformed both of them. The puppy's eyes met hers one last time before sleep claimed him, full of trust, understanding, and the quiet joy of being exactly where he belonged. And in that moment, Mia understood a truth she would carry forever, that love, intuition, and gentle guidance could bridge even the longest absence, and that the heart always remembers, even when the mind forgets. The morning sun stretched its golden fingers through Mia's curtains, filling her room with a soft, warm glow. Dust motes floated lazily in the light, catching in the strands of her hair, shimmering like tiny sparks of magic. The puppy stirred at the edge of the bed, stretching his tiny body slowly, ears twitching as he listened to the quiet symphony of the waking house, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze, the distant hum of a neighbor's car. Mia smiled, brushing a stray strand of hair from her eyes. The tiny creature at her feet had grown into so much more than a pet over the past week. He was her companion, her guide, and, somehow, a gentle mirror reflecting the quiet parts of her heart she had never paid attention to. She knelt and reached down to stroke his soft fur, feeling warmth radiate from him into her own chest. "Good morning, little guy," she whispered, her voice calm and low. He responded immediately, nudging her hand with his nose, tail sweeping back and forth in slow, deliberate arcs, a rhythm that seemed to match her own heartbeat. For a moment, they simply watched each other, the world outside paused, and the sunlight wrapped them in a soft embrace. Today felt different, though. There was a subtle tension in the air, not frightening, but significant, a quiet promise that something profound was about to unfold. The puppy padded lightly to her desk and nudged a small envelope with his nose, looking back at her with bright, intelligent eyes. She picked it up and smiled softly, recognizing her grandmother's handwriting. She had read most of her grandmother's letters already, but somehow this one seemed heavier, more important. Inside, the letter spoke of intuition, empathy, and the unseen threads that connect hearts across time and distance. Her grandmother's words, simple yet profound, encouraged noticing the small, overlooked things in life, the quiet gestures, the subtle signs, the invisible bridges that link one soul to another. Mia's chest tightened as she realized the letter was meant not just for her, but for the puppy as well. He had led her here, nudged her to pay attention, and reminded her that sometimes love reveals itself in the smallest details. She smiled and lowered the envelope, looking at him. "You've taught me so much," she whispered. He shifted closer, pressing his tiny head against her arm, eyes half-lidded but fully aware. It was as though he understood every thought she had, every feeling she hadn't yet found the words for. Later, she decided to take him outside. The air was crisp, brushing against her cheeks as they walked slowly through the quiet neighborhood. The puppy trotted beside her, nose twitching, ears alert, and tail swaying deliberately. Every so often, he paused to sniff a particular spot in the grass or paw lightly at a patch of earth, then looked back at her, as if urging her to notice what he noticed. Mia followed his lead, bending down to examine tiny wildflowers tucked in the lawn, watching bees hover over the blossoms, and smiling at the small details she had often overlooked in her rush through life. "See," she whispered. "The world is full of little miracles." He responded with a gentle nudge of his nose against her hand, tail sweeping slowly. By midday, they had wandered to the park nearby, sunlight streaming through the branches of the tall oak trees, casting moving patterns of shadow and light across the grass. The puppy paused at every tree and every corner, sniffing and observing, guiding Mia's attention to the small wonders of the world, the ripple of a leaf in the wind, the way sunlight glimmered on the wings of a passing dragonfly, the delicate fragrance of wildflowers she might never have noticed before. She realized that his presence had changed not only her routine but the way she saw everything around her. Sitting on the grass, she let the puppy curl into her lap. She brushed her fingers along his soft fur, feeling the warmth, the rhythm of his breath, the steady heartbeat that matched hers. "You've changed me," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. "In ways I didn't even know I needed." The puppy looked up at her, eyes glimmering, tail wagging slowly. He didn't need to speak, she could feel the truth in his gaze, that he had found his place, and so had she. Hours passed in a warm, comfortable silence. Mia reflected on the past week, the first timid whimper in the corner of her room, the soft nudges toward lost notes and keepsakes, the gentle guidance through moments she hadn't noticed. Every day had revealed a new layer of their connection, a deeper understanding of trust, empathy, and love. It wasn't dramatic or loud, but subtle, persistent, and profoundly moving. Returning home, Mia placed a small bouquet of wildflowers in a vase on her desk, a gift guided by the puppy's careful nudges that morning. She looked down at him, smiling. "You notice the things I forget," she whispered. "And you remind me what really matters." He responded with a quiet nudge, pressing closer to her side. As evening approached, the room filled with golden lamplight, warm and calm. The puppy curled up beside her on the bed, tiny head resting on her arm. Mia lay next to him, tracing gentle circles over his soft fur, listening to the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Outside, the world was muted, the faint chirping of crickets, the soft rustle of leaves, the distant hum of cars, but inside her room, a profound peace had settled. Her parents peeked in, noticing the quiet intimacy of the moment. "He's changed her," her mother whispered to her father. "And she's changed him." Mia nodded silently, eyes closed, savoring the warmth, the understanding, and the sense of completeness that had filled the room. Night deepened, and Mia lay awake, reflecting on all the small miracles the puppy had brought into her life. She remembered the letter from her grandmother, the old photograph from the park, the subtle nudges toward forgotten keepsakes, all reminders that connection and love are often quiet, hidden in the smallest gestures. The puppy had guided her not only to discover his past but to recognize the beauty, patience, and trust within herself. "I think we're meant for each other," she whispered into the dim room, fingers brushing the soft fur along his back. He shifted slightly, pressing his head against her chest, tail wagging slowly, rhythm matching her own heartbeat. For the first time, she understood that home wasn't just a place, it was a feeling, a shared space of trust, warmth, and understanding. And for her, home had 4 paws, a soft coat, and eyes that held the wisdom of quiet intuition. As the night carried on, the puppy stirred slightly, tail flicking, ears alert. Mia opened her eyes, watching him, feeling the calm, enduring bond that had grown between them. She realized that the journey they had shared, beginning with his timid whimper in a corner and leading to this profound connection, was a quiet miracle in itself. The room glowed softly, and Mia whispered again, "We're home, together." The puppy pressed closer, resting his tiny head fully against her arm, breathing softly, eyes half closed but completely aware. In the gentle hush of night, she understood something beautiful: love doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures. Sometimes, it arrives softly, quietly, in the gentle nudges, the deliberate wag of a tail, the intuitive gestures that guide a heart to notice what truly matters. And sometimes, it arrives in the form of a small, dusty puppy who somehow knew exactly what her heart had been waiting for. Mia smiled, closing her eyes, and let sleep carry them both. She could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of his fur, the gentle beat of their hearts in quiet synchrony. Outside, the world continued, but inside, they had found a peace that would endure, an unspoken understanding, a shared rhythm, a gentle, lasting love that could weather any quiet storm. And as the night deepened, the golden light fading to silver shadows, Mia whispered one last time, "Thank you, for everything." The puppy responded with a tiny nuzzle, tail wagging ever so slowly, as if to say, "And thank you, too, for trusting me." They were home. Together. And the quiet magic of their bond would carry them through every day that followed, a living reminder that sometimes the smallest, most unexpected companions can change a life in the most extraordinary ways.